Today we have the distinct pleasure of having Nigel Thurlow with us. Nigel, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's a great event, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
For the folks that don't know Nigel Thurlow, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow, so I'm a Brit. That's the beginning. I moved to the States about 15 years ago, but my life really started in this sort of lean world. Back in Europe at Toyota Motor Europe, I was lucky enough. I was a project manager for many years and technical guy. I was working in electronics and then into computing. So I was an electrical engineer to begin with, went in the computing side of things. But then I got lucky and got hired by TME, Toyota Motor Europe. And that's where my lean journey starts. And anybody ever reads my LinkedIn profile, I'll leave it on there. My first 5 years with Toyota, I consider the best paid learning experience I ever had. I got paid to learn for years in depth, being taught by some of the best people from manufacturing. So that's a little bit about my background. I moved to America some years ago after spending 10 years in Belgium. And I started getting involved with the agile world. We'd been talking about it back in Belgium at Toyota Motor Europe. But when I moved to the States, I was lucky enough to start working with some people directly, people directly related to the Agile Manifesto, people who wrote the manifesto. And I got an opportunity to do some consulting with them and learned a great deal from them. But then I suddenly realized this is really easy. Why is this so damned easy? Because it's just lean thinking. So when people talk about agility, it's PDCA with discipline, small batch PDCA. Problem with Toyota, we never know how long PDCA cycles will last. So it brings a bit of discipline to that. And then really from that work, I got lucky, I got called back to Toyota. I spent more years with Toyota, some more years in Toyota in North America, specifically Toyota Connected. And I was able then to take what I'd learned in the agile world, mesh it symbiotically with what I'd learned in the Toyota world to show that one was inspired by the other. And if you read a lot of the people, they say it's inspired by TPS. And then to explain that to people and to create what we called Scrum the Toyota Way, which was a way of bringing these things. It was a play on words. It was taking Scrum, an agile technique, and the Toyota Way. Were we scrumming the Toyota Way? Or were we doing Scrum the Toyota Way? Anyway, a bit of a play on words. It was a thing. But I got to train over 4,000 people across Toyota globally on those techniques and methods. So I have a lot to thank Toyota for. It's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Nigel and I have been chatting just a little bit before we hopped on this, and super insightful in this space of how technology and lean practices and the Shingo model come together and some of the emerging work that's going on in that space. We're going to really dive into that, and we've got a pretty open conversation today, which I think is going to be pretty exciting. We're going to see where Nigel can take us. There's a few things that are on my mind, but I'm really interested to see what's inside of his mind.
Be scared. Be very scared.
Be scary, huh? So just to start things off, one of the quotes I've heard you say, and you say it a lot, is that lean has no tools, only behaviors.
That's right.
Always interested me. Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, people will see tools in lean such as and-on cords and SMED and things of that nature. But when you start to look at all the elements of that, it's all about behaviors. Take and-on as the easy one, the easy metaphor everybody knows. Pulling the cord, potentially enabling a line stop if you see a problem, spot a problem. What you're doing is enabling a behavior of a person on a production line to actually consider the quality of the product that they're participating in creating and make a decision, take a decision to alert somebody to a potential problem and or stop the line completely if the problem can't be resolved in the time he's got to work on that particular issue. That to me is a behavior. And everything really stems from behavior. If you start about lean thinking, the Shingo model, agile, any of these sort of things, it all comes down to human behaviors, human factors, the way we act and behave. So you strip away the naming conventions of tools, what you're left with is the human behaviors.
As you've been engaged in this work and you're starting to see some of the transition that's happening with technology and its influence on the kind of the human aspects of work, how are you seeing that kind of impact the way which people are working and kind of the role of people in not just manufacturing, maybe software development, but in any work?
You know, people is what it's all about. I was lucky enough to do some work about 2 years ago in a food processing plant, and it made me realize, I actually went on the line. I asked if I could go on the line, hardest day's work I'd ever done. I did a whole day, nearly killed me. I'm too old for heavy physical work now, or too lazy, one or the other. But what it taught me is the hardest workers get paid the least amount of money and often get the least amount of respect and consideration. And a lot of it for me was then about bringing dignity, a sense of self-worth, a sense of achievement to these people. And then I started to look at the problem over the years. I've done this sort of work for years, be it in corporate life, in software, in the digital space, or in the manufacturing and sort of the more physical space. And I've spent a lot of time talking to leaders about their behaviors, their attitudes. And of course, in the lean world, we talk about going to Gemba, going to the real place, Genshin Genbutsu. And my boss taught me that doesn't mean go and see, by the way. That means go and observe, no assumptions, and take action. So it's about learning and understanding and taking action and participating and leaning in. These phrases that leaders love to hear. You've got to lean into that. Well, how about your participation and engagement and leaning in, Mr. Leader or Mrs. Leader? And what we tend to find, and what I found, is that they ask me to come in, they ask me to look at the problems, they ask me to do all the things we do, and we could go off in a lot of different directions talking about the stuff that lean people do and the Shingo folks do, or paid people like my friend Dave Snowden in the sense-making world, which is more complexity work. And we start to look at the problems of the system. And I was even on a phone call this morning before I came to join you, and I was talking about a CEO and a COO of my friends working with at the plant, and it's a fruit processing plant, and we're talking about material handling. He even took the CEO to the line and stood the CEO there for an hour at the line, watching the machine not working because it wasn't working, and seeing the damage to the fruit, the material handling. And he says, I don't get it. I don't know what I'm looking at. And this is the sort of thing I start to, when I do all this work and I understand what's going wrong within the system, I then go and present this to the leaders. You show them the mirror. And what I've learned is a lot of leaders don't like looking in the mirror. They don't like realizing they either don't understand how they do what they do, a phrase I use quite a lot. I ask them, do you know how you do what you do? Because until you understand how you do what you do, you can't change how you do what you do. And that's my lead into value stream mapping and other types of mapping techniques to make work visible. Because if you can't see it, you can't fix it. But the challenge with a lot of leaders, and I was talking to you before the recording, and as a slide I'll use in today's presentation at the Shingo event, if you have a seven-figure pay package, and some of the leaders I work with are earning $2, $3, $4, $5 million a year packages. So talk about people doing the hardest work on the lowest amount of wage, and you got these people earning $3, $4, $5 million a year. They don't have a problem. Somebody else does. And so their world, the system that is running, be it a production facility, be it the digital environment, which is much harder to see. The difference between production facilities, it's high visibility, low variability. In the digital world, it's high variability, low visibility. So these folks, when you say go to Gemba, where's the Gemba? How do I go and see this? And so that's one of the challenges, to get them to be able to see. In the title of a famous book, Learning to See, teach them to learn to see. And so the thing is this, you take them into these you start to try and explain to them that the system isn't working optimally, but the system's working optimally for them, because trust me, my incentives, my bonus, my annual pay package, my annual salary package is extremely working well, and I don't need to change. Why do I need to change? So until there's a sufficient level of pain or fear that's affecting them directly, change is extremely difficult. And I change at a small scale. My old boss at Toyota used to say to me, this works, the agile thing, it works really well. And we can say the same about lean, agile, lean, and they're almost the same thing, by the way. It always works well at small scale. You get a small team, 5 people. I was talking to Mike Rother last night. 5 people, Toyota Kata, repeatable behaviors, great, fantastic, all works well. But what if I want to scale that to 500 or 5,000 people? The scaling challenge becomes the problem. And so all these things work really well, but once we need to change those behaviors across a larger landscape, then we're getting into leadership territory, we're getting into sort of silos, we're getting into egos, power, greed, control, all these sorts of emotions, and all these people earning astronomical levels of money, which I'm sure they deserve, and I wish them well on that, and I would dearly like to be one of them. But the reality is they don't see a problem with the system because the system is working really well for them. Once we get that level of pain that affects them directly, or that level of fear of losing their position, losing that nice tidy income, then they'll act. But the acting tends to be temporary. My old boss again at Toyota used to say, we always work really well in a crisis. How do we sustain that level of collaboration and working and capability when we're actually not in a crisis?
No, those are incredible insights, and so many directions we could go with that. You talked a little bit about making work visible.
Yes.
The world is seeing technology do so many crazy things. AI being able to just mimic a human, and deep fake and all kinds of things that are out there. How can AI help increase the visibility, or technology in general, increase the visibility for what we would have considered in the past, some of those classic things? You talked about high visibility environments versus low visibility environments. How can technology help a production environment have better insight into how work is flowing or where work is at?
Yeah, I had a conversation recently on another podcast I was doing about what's the role of the continuous improvement manager, the OPEX expert, or the Lean Six Sigma black belt, whatever titles you want to give the folks that look at how to improve systems. The first thing we all know is make work visible, high visibility. I mean, we taught this and it's drilled into me in my Toyota years about, if you can't visualize it, I don't understand it. So I have to be able to find a way to make the work visible. So let's think about, on a production line, you can go spend a lot of time at the line, which every leader should do. There should be no excuse for even the highest executives spending time understanding how they do what they do. Because if you can't see it, you can't fix it. But then you get to the point where you go, okay, so that's a level of engagement we want. But then CI managers and CI departments, continuous improvement departments, tend to be relatively small and sometimes constrained in what they can do. And I started musing with a friend of mine who's doing a lot of work in RFID. So the tags where we tag product for traceability through supply chain. And I thought, well, why don't we just stick small, cheap, 50-cent labels on. We could do statistical sampling, depends if you're in, the statistics, SQC territory or something like that, or you could do the whole lot if you want to, just stick one on every one. But then AI with sensor technology and the ability to read this can start to visualize that in a 3D world so you can actually see what's happening in real time and be alerted where you've got recurrence. We're looking for patterns. I mean, when you watch the line, you're looking for patterns. How often is this maybe do an hour by hour chart? How often is this process stopping or failing, and what's the reasons it's failing? Program the production line controller for different fault codes so you can start to understand. What if you could take all that laborious task away? Not to say we shouldn't ever stop going to Gemba. Bad, evil, wrong. Don't always go to Gemba.
You go too far.
So, but it gives us the ability for us to start to visualize and understand what's happening on the line in real time, especially in a large production facility with lots of, complicated interactions within the lines and different lines that are connecting and sub-assemblies and things. So we can actually start to understand, and that helps us to focus our attention for Jishuken or for Kaizen-related activity. But now let's move into that digital domain. Let's move into that where we can't stick RFID tags on things. There is nothing to stick on anything. But we've got that high variability, the beauty of agility and agile ways of working is we can work with high variability. We want innovation, creativity, research and development, rapid change. That's some of the features of agility. But with that comes low visibility because it's all in the digital domain. You can't see it. So how do we make the work visible? Well, how about using the newer AI techniques and AI agents and various other technologies to be actually able to map in real time where the constraints are? Is it compute power that's the problem? Is it waiting for a decision from one of those overpaid leaders? Is it waiting for some other process to complete? Is it when we're merging code, we're getting problems with collisions because version control wasn't properly sustained? So there's a whole bunch of different ways we could start to think about how do we use the technology to better inform us. And remember, the principle of Jidoka is the machines serve us. We don't serve the machines. Yeah, that's the whole point of that. May even mention that later in the keynote. So from that point of view, how do we get the machine serving as well so we are better informed, so we can make better decisions? The challenge is we see AI and other techniques and technology as a way to produce faster and produce hopefully better and to make more money, even though the purpose of a company should be to create a customer, quoting Drucker back in the day. But the point is this, that we're using the technology, but we don't think about using the technology for optimization, for actually learning to see the work and for Kaizen activity. Maybe some people do, but in general, most organizations I go into don't even think about some of the words we're using this morning.
I love where you're going with this, the idea and this concept that, of Jidoka, of machines helping humans do human work and taking over work that shouldn't be done by humans.
Yes.
Right? And so I think that dynamic. So when you think of that in the role of a leader, how does the leader's role change when you're able to add this component of some of those things that we used to think leaders were very important for, taking attendance or something, whatever, keeping people staffed and some of those tasks, or maybe having the right people in the right space on the line. How does the role of leader change now when technology can help us with some of those?
I've been musing this a lot with a lot of folks because when we think about good strategic planning, some people use Hoshinkanri or techniques like that. A lot of companies have no real strategy, other than let's make more money and dominate the market,
more the same thing.
More the
faster.
same thing. Sell harder, work faster, that type of thing. But then we start to think about, well, could AI be used to help us make better strategic decisions? Could it inform us more about markets, about trends? Hey, where Bitcoin's going, that type of thing. I throw that in just for a bit of fun from a personal perspective. But how can we use the technology so we can make better decisions? We can also have that bit of foresight. We talk about weak signal detection. How do we know what we need to know before we need to know it? What would we have done differently if we knew COVID was coming 2 months before COVID arrived? Business continuity, business resilience. Resilience is a synonym for agility. So when we talk about agile and agility, we mean resilience. The ability to respond and recover rapidly from a change that's impacted us in some way, be it a political change, a financial change, tariffs are topical at the moment, this type of thing. But then we start to think, well, hold on, with agentic AI, which is the new rise of the agents, not quite Arnie and Terminator yet, but, the rise of autonomous capability to do things. And then I start to think, well, maybe potentially we'll start replacing line managers with agentic AI because, hey, they can make decisions based upon a whole bunch of things rapidly. And it's not algorithmic. It's not deterministic here. This is probabilistic. So this is where the agent now has the ability to think and to reason and to consider its previous decisions, not only its current factors. And that starts to worry me a little bit. Then I start to think, well, what if they start replacing some of these senior executives with these agentic capabilities to make decisions about the direction of a company in the future? And I muse sometimes in some of my talks about the Peter Principle, something from the 1960s, a professor talked about it, where people are promoted, they've done really, really well in their job, awesome. So they're promoted into this leadership role, they've got no skills and no experience in, and they're dreadful. And you start to think, Then there's this other thing called human enfeeblement, which is, ask a Gen Zer how to read a map book, this type of thing, or, change a tire on a car, this type of thing. Or, where's the oil filter? What's an oil filter? These sorts of things. And so with this is human enfeeblement. We become so over-reliant on the technology that we lose the skills to do this work ourselves. So we now rely on the technology. We become over-reliant on it. We can't live and cope without it. So then we get this agentic capability, which is basically giving agency, power of attorney to the AI to make decisions. So how far does this go? Line manager, supervisor, admin worker, senior director, senior vice president, executive, CEO. These are the things that make me think about where we're going in the future. Some good stuff there, and that brings me all the way back to Sakichi Toyoda and Jidoka and about the fact that we build the machines to serve us. The danger is now with the acceleration of the technology, we may flip the other way.
Wow. As you've worked with many organizations, you obviously are thinking big about the implications and impacts on the future. What concerns do you have that are not being talked about enough, that as organizations are looking to get on some transformational journey to get better, to serve more value, serve more customers more effectively, and technology is kind of being thrown in there? What are some of the concerns you have, or some of the things that you're watching out for that you would encourage organizations to watch out for as they do that?
I think, look, there's a couple of things. If you're not talking about AI, you're not looking at AI, you're not reading about AI now, you're missing the boat quickly. You really need to be focused on this. And for manufacturing in the physical world, it's coming. It's already here. I mean, NVIDIA and others are partnering with other companies for AI-driven warehouses now. I mean, we've all seen the big Amazon warehouses with robots running around. But now we're talking about machines that can make decisions based upon their own thinking, their own synthetic human-like sort of reasoning, if you like. And this is only going to get better and faster and quicker. And even Geoffrey Hinton, who's the godfather of AI, invented neural networks, machine learning guy, is saying the pace of change now is so fast, he's scared of what it means to this. So that's that. When we start to think of leaders and you mentioned the word transformation. I often think transformation is the wrong word. I think we're in a constant evolution.
Okay.
We're trying to, we talked about digital transformation, which was really, you've got old technology, go update it, just refresh it a bit, use new stuff. We talk about methods and techniques. We're in this constant evolution of learning to do things better, learning to do things in a more improved way, the whole philosophy of Kaizen and continuous improvement. So I think that's a better word. And I think transformation scares a lot of executives because they've all bought these big transformations from the big consulting houses.
Never delivered.
And, 2 years later, we're doing the new transformation. Well, and it always amuses me, and I've said this online a few times. When somebody says I've worked on 25 transformations, you got fired a lot then, because transformations take years. Either that, or you're extremely old and healthy. So we're in this constant evolution. But I think leaders need to be cognizant and aware of what's capable. I do fear for workforce. I think there is a genuine concern. Will it be Armageddon? Probably not. Is it the latest fad? No, it's definitely a thing. It's happening. Will it replace all other jobs? No, we'll evolve, we'll adapt. But the speed of it is accelerating. So there will be any repetitive work, any administrative work. I mean, there's many case studies I could cite that I've been involved in or learned about where admin work, compliance work, heavy paperwork type roles are being eliminated completely and creating effective new capacity in the roles that are more important. So that really is the concept of Jidoka. Take away the stuff that humans shouldn't really be doing for safety or other reasons, or repetitive, boring work. This Norman Bodek's idea of underutilizing talent, and in Toyota we don't use that. We just call that respect for people. So the thing is, from that point of view, it's a good thing. So we want to eliminate some of that, but we also need to be cognizant. If you eliminate too many roles, where are your customers coming from? Because we still need, and that's, even the Australians, I was in a KPMG Shell Oil conference a few weeks back, and they were even talking about UBI, Universal Basic Income. That's the idea of the state providing a minimal income to everybody because there will be more jobless people with the rate of change that's coming. So I think that leaders in organizations need to focus on this. The challenge we have is, if I'm earning $5 million a year, I don't have a problem. Somebody else does.
And you may even have disincentives to change the system because that can only
you get this cognitive dissonance and all this sort of thing. So
tension's there.
And so from an incentive, I mean, incentives are a hot topic. We could go on for hours about those, but incentivize the whole, not the individual. Think about team incentives, group incentives, organizational incentives versus individual incentives. It's interesting to note that Toyota never gives stock options as an example. People join Toyota normally have 10, 20, 30-year-old, in the case of Ritzo Shingo, 40-year careers in Toyota. They never leave. They born, they live, they die, all in Toyota, because they're not incentivized for personal greed. They're incentivized for the group, for the whole, for the community. And the Japanese way is always the we, not the me. And you see that when you visit Japan anyway. So a little bit of that thinking. If you want organizations to survive and be successful longer into the future, we need to move away from individual growth and wealth and greed. And I'm not preaching socialist agendas here, but it's just reality that if we start to focus too much on the individual, we lose sight of the collective. And that's when I'd say my friend took a CEO to the line and said, "What do you see?" And he goes, "I can't see anything." And that's what happens if you focus too much on incentivizing the individual and not incentivizing the organization. Companies fail.
One of my first introductions to kind of this lean world that we're talking about and kind of agile being a evolution of some of that is takes me back to Deming's 14 points.
Yeah.
50s or maybe even before.
Yeah.
What was one of those?
Incentives.
Exactly. All about reducing the individual incentives. And it's interesting how 70 years later, the concept is coming around full circle, and you're seeing that now.
With my work in the agile space, and of course I'm known for some of the stuff I was given the opportunity to do by Toyota, I start to look at this and there's nothing new.
But you sound so futuristic.
You go back and you even look at Taylor, and even Toyota has a lot to thank Taylor for. I mean, all right, there's some bad things, but then you look at the work of Gilbraith, and time and motion studies and things like that. I'm talking about the lady Gilbraith, who was more Lillian. She was more. The husband got the credit, but Lillian was the brains. Trust me.
We could go a long way there too.
But so any ladies watching, she was the brains. But you look at the work they did. And then, of course, you get the TQC movement out of Japan, with Protzman and Sorensen, and then that leading through to, Deming and Stewart. And Deming got the job because Stewart was sick, by the way.
We've always called them Stewart charts,
that's a true story. So, but the point was this, that everything they said, all these people said 100 years ago, we're still saying the same things now. And we don't seem to be learning the lessons, which brings me back to the fact it's a human behavioral problem. I coined something. I was at an LEI event in Poland a few years ago, and I put it in today's presentation for a giggle. But I coined something as a proposition for Nigel's law. I thought, everybody has a law. Why can't I have a law? I want a law. So I said, all organizational complexity is human-derived. And my test for that is if you remove the humans, is the problem still complex to solve? And I've never seen that test fail. Now, that's if you understand the difference between a complicated system and a complex system, but complexity is where it's unpredictable, non-linear, unordered. So this is what we're talking about. But if you remove humans, this complex adaptive system becomes much more of a simple system. And the problem is really easy to solve. What we spend most of our time doing is fighting and arguing and bickering and egos and all this, and my decision is better than your decision. And the Japanese have got it down to a fine art with nemawashi, the art of consensus building. But consensus can take 3 months to get in a Toyota company. Taking the A3 around to everybody, asking them for their opinions, trying to get everybody's opinions baked into this single document to eventually get physical signatures on it. So anyway.
Yep. I love it. I love this history that you bring into it, and how, where we're at today and the behaviors and the principles that were taught years ago that were understood, no matter how technology impacts us, those aren't going to go away.
No. Not
and
at all.
they'll always be there, and there'll be saloon practice.
Not unless we get the rise of the machines, but you know.
Well, all right, dystopian movies aside, we can.
Yeah, no, I think that the behaviour thing is the key, and I think that if you want to take anything away from this conversation, leaders need to look in the mirror more, be humble. I mean, it's hard for me. I'm a Brit. We're not very humble, but you know, be humble. Look in the mirror, recognise your limitations. Listen to the people closest to the work, the people closest to the work at the Gemba. They understand the work and the problems better than you ever will, because your system is still running because they're keeping it running. That's the key.
Love it. Nigel, it's been wonderful chatting with you.
Pleasure.
Great opportunity for everyone to be able to spend a little bit of time and get into the mind of one of our current leading thinkers in this space, Nigel Thurlow. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.